So your discussion here is focused on objectives and hypotheses of the study. Take note, this is the step after your identification of the research problem. So once we have identified your research problem, your next goal is to set the objectives and hypotheses of the study. As a disclaimer, this recorded lecture is intended for Level 3 students of the Bachelor of Science in Nursing program. This lecture does not constitute medical advice or imply research-based evidences. Parts of the discussion may not be suitable for the general public, and this is only a supplementary material. It is being augmented by live or synchronous sessions to reinforce the understanding of the concepts. If there is any, the views expressed in this presentation are of the speaker and do not represent the opinion of any entity or whatsoever with which the speaker have been, will be, and where is affiliated right now. The photograph and videos used in this presentation belong to the respective owners, authors, and websites. No copyright infringement is intended. Concerns on this presentation may be sent to yours truly, gjsporque@gmail.com. For the purpose of the discussion in nursing research, several references were being used, particularly the books indicated on the slide. We would like to thank the authors, Dr. Ardales, Dr. Barrientos Tan, a mentor, Dr. Feli David, and then Polit and Beck on the nursing research, generating and assessing evidence for nursing practice. Now, when I talk about objective, what do we mean by that? When I say objective, guys, that would mean an effect that is desired or expected to be achieved by an activity, a project, or a program. So you might have heard of the term objective maybe in your community health nursing. You might also be doing your nursing care plan and you can see that you have expected outcomes. So these are all outbursts of your objective. In research, when I say objective, it is the desired or expected outcome that we would want to achieve. In other words, what are the data that we want to gather? What do we want to conclude later on, or what do we want to investigate on? That will be answered by your research objective. That's why it's very important for our research objective to be clear, because it will be guiding later on our design, it will be guiding later on our research process. When we are evaluating researches, for example, if I am checking on a research and then I will be looking at the results, the first thing that I would look into after looking into the title is the objectives of the study. Because if I could not understand the objectives of the study, I could not proceed on the next parts of the research. That's how important your objective could get. So when I say research objective, it's the statement of purpose for which the investigation is to be conducted. So you'll be asked questions like, why do you need to conduct this study? What is it that you would want to know? So for example, you will say, this study aims to determine the factors associated with quality of life among children with epilepsy. Or you can say, this study aims to describe the lived experience of women who gave birth during the time of pandemic. These are examples of objectives of the study. So these are aims or goals which are expected to be attained at the end of the research process. For those of you who have been through experimental research, you might have seen objectives which would state, this study aims to determine whether there is a significant difference on the weight of, let's say, petchi, scientific name of which is Brassica napus, when it comes to the weight when they are administered with compost, they're administered with fertilizer, and then perhaps a new substance that you have formulated. Some of you might have encountered objectives which would say there is no significant difference in the zone of inhibition among Staphylococcus aureus growth when treated with antibiotic A, antibiotic B, and antibiotic C. These are all research objectives. And later on, that will be the basis if what will be the design that we will be using for your research. For you to formulate your objectives, I would usually recommend to my students that they need to prepare their paradigm of variables. Whereas actually, if you look at the research process, most of the authors would say that the paradigm of the variables are prepared after the objectives. And there is also a rationale behind that. However, for your purpose, I would recommend that you prepare your objectives along with your paradigm. because your paradigm of research variable, or commonly your conceptual framework, would help you visualize as to where your research is going to. Okay? It will help you visualize as to where your research is going. So for example, for this one, family support, emotional intelligence, and engagement of student nurses in a private college of nursing in Iloilo. The hugot here, guys, is that there are a lot of students who is not engaged in their online classes. I know you could be one of them. Okay? There are a lot of students who are not even listening in their online classes. Or if they will be listening, their attention span will be short. So there are several studies that would show different strategies to improve the engagement of the student nurses. But the question is it really improving? Okay, that's why I had this proposal in mind. Now, if I will be stating my general objective, which is one type of your objective, I could say this study aims to determine the level of family support, the level of emotional intelligence and engagement of student nurses in a private college of nursing in Iloilo. That is my general objective. As you can notice, your general objective is only a restatement of your title. I just rephrased my title and made it the statement and says, this study aims to. Some institutions would say, this study generally aims to determine. Okay, that's how you state your general objective. So that's why if you're looking into the research of your title of your research right now, try to see as to how you can have your general objective. Now you have 4 variables there. I'll be talking about that when we're discussing the specific objectives. Now, what are the major classifications of your objectives? Since I have been talking about objectives, so how do we classify them? 1, so you have your generated or you have your general objective. Okay, let's make that general objective. It is the statement of the purpose, which would use abstract and non-measurable concepts. Okay, why would you say abstract? Meaning it's still big. Okay, we still do not know about it. We are not yet sure as to how to measure it. And then usually, when I talk about general objective, it is the rephrase of your title, as with the example that I have given earlier. Now let's go to your specific objective. Its purpose is to be well-defined. It includes the purpose, it's well-defined, and it is measurable concept based on the logical flow of your general objective. Okay, so look at the word. It's more specific, it's more measurable, and then it would be based on the logical flow of the general objective. Okay, when I say logical flow, as I have shown earlier, there are 4 squares there, which shows your antecedent, independent, and then you have your intervening, and then your dependent variable. When all of these variables combined, later on you will see that the specific objective is formulated in a way that they are in order based on their situation there in your boxes. Okay, allow me to give that as an example. Let's say, for example, guys, in this case, my plan is that my family support will be the independent variable. Okay, family support. Because I see that if the family members will not be supporting the student nurses, it will be very difficult for student nurses to go along with their studies. So let's write there's an example of your independent variable, your family support. Intervening variable, I came to realize when I'm reading the literatures, okay, I did the review of related studies, and I came to realize that even if how supportive the family is, or even not supportive they are, it is the emotional intelligence of the student, okay, it's the emotional quotients of the student that would determine one of its outcomes. Okay, so the emotional intelligence seems to be a prominent determinant of the outcome. And then my dependent variable is engagement of student nurses. That will be my dependent variable. Earlier, if you have captured the discussion, when I talk about independent variable, your independent variable, guys, is described as your presumed cause. Okay, think of it like that. It's a presumed cause. In other words, ano ang dahilan or ano ang pinanggalingan ng problem na to? Diba, my problem is engagement. I have mentioned earlier, student nurses are not engaged. Student nurses might be using their devices during classes. Student nurses might be eating. Student nurses might be playing around or even sleeping during classes. So my concern is engagement of student nurses. And for this reason, guys, your dependent variable is referred to as presumed effect. Okay, it's referred to as the presumed effect. Okay, that's your dependent variable. Now, allow me to go back on the example, family support, emotional intelligence, and engagement of student nurses in a private college of nursing in Iloilo. In this case, guys, if you would review the literature, which I did, I found out that some of the factors that could possibly affect family support are the following. One, the monthly family income. Okay? Mom and dad would want to support us, but the income would not allow them to do so. And then two, the number of children in the family. Okay? Mom and dad would want to support our online class, but having 4 of us sent to school is a difficult task for mom and dad. So number of children in the family is one of the example. And then the third one is, let's pick another variable, the educational attainment. Okay, the educational attainment of the parents. Okay? Studies have shown that, or not really studies, but I have observed, for example, that family members whose parents are high school graduates would actually push their children to finish college because they don't want their children to experience what they have been through. So they want to give their children that gift of education. Okay, for example. Guys, pardon my very nice handwriting there on screen. But to be enlightened again, the antecedent variable that I would want to study on is monthly family income, the number of children, and then the educational attainment of the parents. The independent variable is family support, and then the intervening variable is emotional intelligence, and then the dependent variable is engagement. Now, some of you might be wondering, oh, do we really need to have the 4 boxes? No. If you are doing a descriptive type of research, you don't even need these boxes. But since most of you are embarking on quantitative type of research, and most of your direction is going towards relational type of research, you would need these boxes. Do you need the 4 boxes? No. Okay? Usually, you would have the independent variable and then the dependent variable. But again, for the purpose of this discussion, I'm having these 4 boxes. Okay? Now, let's have it. When I will say general objective, I would say, again, this study aims to determine the level of family support, emotional intelligence, and engagement of student nurses in a private college of nursing in Iloilo City. Okay? During the time of pandemic, I could add that. Now, specific objectives, I would say specifically, this study aims to. Try to write this, guys, as an example. 1. Describe the characteristics of the student nurses in terms of monthly family income, number of children in the family, and educational attainment of parents. Again, specifically, this study aims to describe the monthly family income of the parents in terms of, describe the characteristics of the student nurses in terms of monthly family income, number of children, and then educational attainment. Second, this study aims to describe the level of family support among the student nurses. Number 3, this study aims to determine the level of emotional intelligence of the student nurses. Number 4, this study aims to determine the level of engagement of the student nurses. Now, level of engagement, is it easily measurable, guys? If you would think, level of engagement, what do I mean by level of engagement? So maybe I would say, number of times that you are looking at your instructor during the class, number of hours that you are listening to your instructor, number of recitations that you are having when you are attending your classes. So I would state my 4th specific objective as determine the level of engagement of student nurses in terms of number of recitations during class, number of reactions during class. Di ba? May mga reactions kasi ang ginahatag in platforms like Zoom. Okay, so you can have that. Okay, again, it's more specific. So those are the 4. If you can notice, if you can follow me through, objective 1 is here, objective number 2 is here, Objective number 3 is here. Objective number 4 is here. That's the goal of your specific objectives. Now, that's not the end of it. Okay, that's not the end of it yet. In your correlational research, there are arrows here, which would mean that we are checking into the relationship of these variables. If I would want to check on the relationship of these variables, other than that, there will also be an arrow from family support going towards engagement. Okay, that arrow should be on the bottom. Now, because I would want to check the relationship between these variables, I would need other objectives, your relational objectives. So my objective number 5 would be somewhere here, which would say, this study aims to determine if there is a significant relationship between monthly family income and level of family support. Or I could say, this study aims to determine if there is a relationship between the characteristics, open close parenthesis, monthly family income, number of children, educational attainment, close parenthesis, and level of family support. That's your objective number 5. If I would look into objective number 6, I might say, I would like to determine if there is a significant relationship between the level of family support and level of emotional intelligence. Number 7, I would want to determine if there is a significant relationship between emotional intelligence and level of engagement. And number 8, I would want to determine whether there is a significant relationship between family support and level of engagement. So from this title, you could get at least 8 specific objectives. Okay, at least 8 because I have 3 variables here and an antecedent variable that I am looking into. Okay, I hope that you're getting the picture on this. Your goal here is that while you're listening to this, you'll be able to picture already where's my variable going to. Is it an antecedent? Is it an independent? Is it intervening? Is it dependent? And then what could be my objectives? Okay? I was talking about an example which says there is a significant relationship, determine if there is a significant correlation between, okay? But that's not the case all the time. Your study might want to determine if there is a significant difference. Okay? So we will look into that one by one as you are having your examples later on. So that is how you state your specific objective. Again, this is the product of our output earlier. So when I talk about general objective, it's a general statement. So an example here is a restatement. I would want to emphasize it's the restatement of your research problem. So for example, it would say this study aims to determine the level of family support, emotional intelligence, and engagement of student nurses in a private college of nursing in Iloilo City during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then this is how your specific objectives is supposed to be stated. As you can see, it's a more specific statement, okay, compared to that of your general objective. If you can notice, dear students, there are lines here which would say, determine if there is a significant relationship. So meaning this is a relational objective. It checks, it later on will check if there will be a significant relationship. Okay, these are relational objectives. Okay, another example could be a comparative objective, which is signaled usually by the use of the phrase significant differences. Okay, significant differences. Now, dear students, I would want you to remember again that the examples 1 to 4 here are descriptive objectives. If you would look at it, there's only one variable of concern. Okay, your concern for the first statement is the characteristic, which could be the income, the number of children, and then the educational attainment. On the second objective, your concern is also one. That would be the level of support among the student nurses. In the third objective, your concern is the level of emotional intelligence. And in the fourth objective, your concern is the level of engagement. So we usually refer to that as a univariate objective. Again, the term is univariate objective. In other words, there's only one variable that is being considered in that objective. Your objectives number 5 to 8 are examples of your bivariate objective. It's a bivariate in the sense that there are 2 objectives that you are investigating, 2 variables that you are investigating in this objective. For example, in example number 5, you are looking into the characteristics and then the level of family support. In example number 6, you are looking into the level of family support and then the emotional intelligence. Hence, it's referred to as a bivariate objective. Dear learners, if you would look at 5 to 8, your 5 to 8 is the one that will lead to a hypothesis. Okay? Your relational or comparative objective is the one that will lead to a hypothesis. Okay? Unlike class, if you would look into objectives number 1 to 4, it's less likely. We are not making hypothesis out of descriptive objectives. Okay? Because later on, we will see what a hypothesis is. Okay? Basi magluksot. Okay? Now, in your qualitative research for this one, lived experiences, so I hope you already imbibe the idea that when I say lived experiences, it's leading towards a phenomenological research. So in this case, guys, this is the statement of the problem, okay, which is also another way for us to say the objectives of the study. Okay, we do not need to have the specific examples or the specific variables because we do not know yet what will be the lived experiences of these student nurses. Next, so what are the characteristics of a good research objective? I have been talking about the example. Let's try to evaluate if it fits into this good research objective criteria. One, okay, look at this. This is your SMART actually. I think you've encountered SMART several times already. So it should be simple. It should be measurable. It should be attainable. It should be result-oriented. And then it should also be time-bound. Okay, if you can notice, we have specified it to be during the time of pandemic. Now, if you would say simple language, guys, okay, in a while, guys, So guys, in other words, when I say simple language, we do not use medical jargon here. Okay? We do not use scientific names alone, but instead we would augment it with the common name of the plant or the common name of an animal that we are studying. And we tend to use language that would be understood even by non-nurses, even by non-medical professionals. Because at the end of the day, we are not only inclined to have our research being utilized by nurses alone, although that's our prime goal. However, we would also want others to relate to it. And even nurses, my dear students, would not be able to understand the language. We will not be able to understand the language if it's too complicated. That is actually one of the reasons why nurses are not reading research, because they could not understand the concepts, okay, or they could not understand the terms being used. Next, it should be measurable. When I say measurable, it could be quantified. It could be gathered using a questionnaire. It could be observed using your 5 senses. Attainable, meaning we could do it. We could do it within the time frame that you're expected to. Results, we're looking into data. We are looking into the possibilities of gathering information from the questionnaire that you have. And then lastly, it should be time-bound. So as I've mentioned, it should be within a certain time frame. That's how you would have a good research objective. So how do we state? Again, it should be clear. It should be declarative. It could be also in a question form. Whether it is declarative or question would actually depend on the researcher. In your case as students, it would usually depend on the recommendation of the institution. So, question form. In our example earlier, for example, I can say objective number 1, 2. Okay, let's say objective number 2. I can restate it and say, what is the level of support or what is the level of family support among student nurses in a private university in Iloilo? I could rephrase objective number 3 and say, what is the level of emotional intelligence of the respondents? Okay, I could say objective number 4 as, or let's say objective number 5, is there a significant relationship between the characteristics and then the level of family support? Okay, the next objective would say, is there a significant relationship between the level of family support and emotional intelligence of student nurses? As you can see, I just made the statement a question. Okay, that's another way of doing your research objective. Next, so this is another example. Yeah, I just reposted it. So let's go to hypothesis. Hypothesis. Perhaps the first phrase that should come into your mind when you hear the word hypothesis is educated guess. When I say hypothesis, it is an educated guess. It is a statement about expected relationship between two or more variables. So as you can see, highlight the word two or more variables. I could not make a hypothesis if I only have one variable in consideration. That's why I said that you will be using objectives number 5 to 8 as an example of an objective that could be made as an hypothesis. Now, a hypothesis is also a formal affirmative statement. Okay, formal affirmative statement. When I say affirmative, it's a sentence that would predict a single research outcome, a tentative explanation between two or more variables. And a hypothesis would generate an empirical study which would seek to confirm or disconfirm it. An example of an hypothesis so that you'll be enlightened. Okay, look at objective number 4. Determine whether there is a significant relationship between characteristics and level of family support. If I would make that as an hypothesis, it would go like this. There is no significant relationship between the characteristics and the level of family support. That is how you state your that is how you state your hypothesis. Again, I would like to say it again. There is no significant relationship between the characteristics and the level of family support. Okay? As you can notice, it's a declarative statement, meaning it's a sentence, okay, in a declarative form with a period in the end, which tries to explain what's the relationship. Oftentimes, researchers would start with saying, there is no. When I say there is no, that is another type of hypothesis. To be more specific, that is your null hypothesis. Okay? We'll go to that later on. Next. So when I talk about hypothesis, it's a tentative generalization. As you can see, I had a generalization. There is no significant relationship between the characteristics and level of support. I generalize, but this is just tentative, okay? And that is between two variables. Then, it is an educated guess because it's formulated by critical thinking, okay? That statement of mine is not actually from palagpatism. It's not actually a guess. It's not a hunch. But I got it from experience. I got it from literatures that would say, oh, maybe family members with no income really does not matter on the family support. So there's a basis to that. I use critical thinking to come up with that statement. Now, a descriptive objective do not require hypothesis. I would like to re-emphasize on this. As I mentioned earlier, a descriptive objective does not require hypothesis. Okay? Then, it could be comparative. It could be relational in nature. Okay? It could be comparative and relational in nature. Now, there are different types of hypothesis. The example that I have given you earlier, dear students, is a null hypothesis. When I say null, it's a statement of denial. Walang kayo, okay, wala kayong relationship, wala kayong pinagkaiba, okay, or walang epekto sa isa't isa. In other words, as I would say, there is no significant relationship between the level of family support and emotional intelligence of the student nurses. Look at the term, there is no, okay? That is the easiest way for you to say it's null because there is no. Okay, elementary knowledge would tell us null, no. Okay, I hope you'll be able to capture that. But another way of stating it is by saying the level of family support among students from varied monthly family income is still the same. Again, I would like to say that again. The level of family support from students who came from families of different socio-economic strata are still the same. Now, some of my students are very interested of looking at there is no. When they say there is no, they already know that this is null hypothesis. But take note, when I say is still the same, are still equal, that is still just like saying there is no significant difference. Okay, so it's a statement like there is no, it is equal, it is the same, it's null hypothesis. Okay? That's null hypothesis. I hope that you'll be able to capture that. Do not just say, pag may no null. Hindi lang lahat ng no null, no? So try to find other context words and use your critical thinking. The alternative hypothesis, on the other hand, is the opposite of your null hypothesis. So when I say opposite of your null hypothesis, it's like saying there is a relationship between A and B. Okay? There is a significant difference between A and B. That's how you do your alternative hypothesis. Okay, oftentimes they say alternative hypothesis is what the researcher wants to attain. It is the statement that the researcher would want to attain. That's your alternative hypothesis. If you can recall your lessons in statistics, the goal of a statistical test is to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, because we would want to test if the null hypothesis is true or not. And we would want to reject the null hypothesis. That's why in a statistical conclusion, we would usually say, therefore, we reject the null hypothesis. If not, we say, therefore, we failed to reject the null hypothesis. We never say that we accept the null hypothesis. We just say reject or failed to reject. Tandaan nyo yan, guys. Hindi lahat naman ng bagay na nire-reject nyo, dapat i-accept nyo, no? So, okay, there's just reject or fail to reject. That's how we deal with a statistical conclusion. Now, the research or scientific hypothesis is actually your alternative hypothesis. It is an affirmative statement that would predict a single research outcome. Again, it's still a tentative guess of the relationship or difference between the variables. And the characteristic of a good hypothesis, it's reasonable in that they are offshoots, it's testable and found to be probably true or probably false, it would conform with known facts or theories, and stated in the simplest possible terms. Okay? Guys, usually, as I mentioned, we use null hypothesis in testing research. However, it would depend also in institutional guidelines. Okay, there are researchers, for example, who would say there is a significant relationship between ventilation and the quality of care that the patient receives. And that is based on the theory of Florence Nightingale, which would say ventilation has really an effect on the quality of care of the patient. So it would actually depend on the institution where you are working. And later on, it would depend on your direction as a researcher. Okay, if you would want, for example, to put Nightingale's theory into test, maybe you could use your alternative hypothesis. Now, so hypothesis, hypothetenai is the word of origin, the etymology of your hypothesis. Hypothetenai would mean to put under or to suppose. It's an assumption. Again, it's an educated guess. So what are the sources of hypothesis? It could be an introduction, which is a simple or specific situation, to complex or general one. Induction. I would mean induction. When I say induction, it is a simple or specific situation to a complex one. And then when I say deduction, it could be the application of theories or principles to a particular situation. Okay, to induct and then to deduct. Allow me to give examples for you to understand further. So when I say induction, guys, as one source of hypothesis, for example, I've noticed, children who would drink milk tend to become healthy. Okay, this child drinks milk, he becomes healthy. Another child drinks milk, he's healthy. Another child drinks milk, he's healthy. Meaning I could make a hypothesis that the amount of milk taken by the child could be related to the weight of the child. I call that induction. But if I have deduction, let's say, for example, there is this theorist who would say nurses are prone to stress because of the number of patients that they are encountering. Okay, that's being said by one theory. She has a generalization. As a researcher, I could say, maybe my respondents will also be stressed because she is a nurse. And that is based on the theory that one author has made. That is deduction. Okay, so try to analyze that. Look at this. Induction, specific to general. Deduction, I would usually tell my students, deduction, deduce, pinaliit mo. So deduction would be from general to specific. Okay, remember these concepts. It has several applications in our topics in nursing. So, the types of hypothesis. Simple. Pag sinabing simple, one independent and one dependent variable. For example, there is no significant relationship between the amount of milk taken and the weight of child. That's a simple hypothesis. Kung nakita nyo, ang variables natin is simply the amount of milk and then the weight of the child. When I talk about complex hypothesis, marami. Okay, there are two or more variables. That's why it's referred to as multivariate na hypothesis. Okay, example, I would want to say there is no significant relationship between the amount of milk, the type of milk, the temperature of milk, and then the weight of the child. As you can see, okay, I tried to explore amount, type, temperature of milk, and then the weight of the child. Who knows, no? If the child is drinking milk, but then the milk is just all the artificial milk available, and then the child may have the tendency to be obese. That's why I would want to check on that. So that's a multivariate hypothesis. Okay, multivariate hypothesis. And then you have your directional or non-directional hypothesis. So when I say directional, your keywords there is that you would hear words which says higher, lower, better. You would hear the words bigger. Whereas when I say non-directional, it would just say there is no relationship. To give you an example, non-directional first. I can say that there is no significant difference on the knowledge about COVID-19 among nurses and doctors. Okay, that could be one non-directional hypothesis. When I say directional hypothesis, I could say doctors are more knowledgeable or doctors have more knowledge about COVID-19 compared to nurses. As you can see, naghambal na ko nga more knowledge. Okay, I already specified more knowledge. That's a directional hypothesis. Its relevance in research, it would also depend on the literature being reviewed by the researcher. Kung ikaw ang researcher at saka nakita mo na there are a lot of literature that would say that doctors are indeed more knowledgeable about COVID-19 compared to nurses, you can go on the directional hypothesis. But if you do not have a basis to that, you'd rather stick to a non-directional hypothesis, which would say that there is no significant relationship or there is no significant difference on the knowledge of the doctors and nurses when it comes to COVID-19. Okay, that is how you do your directional versus non-directional hypothesis. For our purposes in nursing research, particularly in your pursuit of an undergraduate research, the recommendation is for you to use the null hypothesis and then the non-directional hypothesis. So guys, when I talk about hypothesis, I could say this hypothesis is bivariate, this hypothesis is a null hypothesis, and a non-directional hypothesis. Okay, so those are the three classifications of your hypothesis. Okay? Now, do you have any